Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Hunter, the creator, director, and lead mind behind Hunter Reviews. Also the voice of Hunter Reviews, just everything Hunter Reviews. I'm the creator of Hunter Reviews, and I figured Hunter Reviews Star Wars The Last Jedi was one of my favorite reviews to work on, especially for the opening scene where they're fighting what I call the what I call the Death Mickey, and then we go into the full review, and it was a ton of fun. I figured I'd go into the creative process of that, show you how that all came to be, and before I delete it off my hard drive forever, or at least all the files that went into it. Well, let's start out at the beginning here. A lot of people didn't notice this, but it starts right here at the beginning bit. Then yes, that is an X-Wing. And so instead of a bullet whizzing by, it's an X-Wing going by. You can zoom in right here. You pull this up, make that a bit bigger. The way it actually works is actually a very simple image slide by. It starts out in this frame, and then this cutout right here is the actual screen of what you can see. And it goes across like such. It's only on screen for a couple of frames because it's supposed to be very fast, but it's there. A lot of people failed to realize that it was actually there. So we'll zoom. So we'll keep that moving. This this was actually one big giant image that I pulled together. The whole image is this. Yes, it is the entire planet. The image itself was pulled from, I think I found that on a web search for Ice Planet, and I stumbled across this from Elite Dangerous. I think I found this on, it's an image from Elite Dangerous, and the way this works is relatively the same way. It starts off standard. Then I go over to this. These two are separate images. I have one image to start out with it just standing still, and another image where it's actually in motion, and it pans down to the planet like that. And that's the actual shot that we see around here. And that's where it pops in. And the whole effect makes for a nice pan down towards the planet, the way a standard Star Wars movie would open up. That's what I was kind of going for with that. The song that I'm using here, I'm not entirely sure who made it. It's the heavy metal version of the Imperial March, which I always loved the Imperial March, and the metal version I was super into. I think the first time I heard it was Lego Star Wars 2. I could be wrong about that. I'm not entirely sure. But then the Death Star comes into view. The sound effect for the warp drive was actually from the Millennium Falcon, a sound clip that I pulled off the internet. You could zoom in here. The image was actually created by myself. It is three of the same image cropped together to form Mickey's head. It's sort of like the Mickey logo, and it came out pretty good. This version is a little bit different from what I actually posted on the internet when we voted as to what to use, because the other idea was to use what they did was they had like these giant projectors to make Spaceship Earth and Epcot look like the Death Star, and I was gonna go with that, but then I came up with this better idea to use to create the Mickey Mouse logo. And that pans in that pans into view when it flashes into existence, which is literally just a fade in from nothing. It just flashes in. Like if I were to get rid of that, it would just be there all of a sudden. There it is. And then that cuts over to the hidden base. The image here, as you can tell, this was actually... let me bring this into full view. I actually cropped out the top there because it was a whole set. It was a whole set image from The Empire Strikes Back of the Hoth base. You could still... I think I got out most of it. You could see some of the wires hanging down. But I think that's actually a good aesthetic there, so I kept that. But you could clearly tell that this is supposed to be a set. So I got rid of the illusion to the best of my ability. So that's why I basically just got rid of the top, and and then what we're left with is just this shot right here. And this is where Hunter comes into frame.
They may not even be here for us.
Hunter's vector, I literally just have a vector filled with different images of him with a transparent background. He pans in the same way that the Death Star pans in from, but this one's from off camera. The way it actually works is, here, let me show you. These little points down here, this is point A. This is the starting point where he's actually off camera. And then that transitions over to point B, where I set it to he has to be on the screen at this particular time. So then literally this, you just move this around. I currently have it locked to up and down movement because it's easier that way. So that goes on for a little bit. We have Greg off camera, which I'm actually not too... Sorry, I forgot to... This goes on for a little bit. Then we have Greg off camera, which is basically just me talking into a pillow. I'm not particularly satisfied with how his voice came out in this, because he sounds like the alarm.
Okay, maybe they are here.
So that goes on for a little bit. Then Lyra pops in. Same method. Her little hep that she does. I literally just searched hup on YouTube. Came up with like a vine of this guy grabbing a pillow. So that's where that came from. I took the audio from that.
Prepare my ship, the Aluminum Falcon.
The Aluminum Falcon, there was a number of images of the Aluminum Falcon floating around the internet. It's literally just a Millennium Falcon made out of aluminum foil. I photoshopped around the actual Falcon. Now this one actually has a number of points on it. This first point is it coming up like it did. The second point is it in view. Then it's wobbling for a little bit, and then it pans upward. Oop. And this is how it looks on film. The back image for the Aluminum Falcon, the Millennium Falcon cockpit, was difficult to find. Eventually, I had to settle for this rather pixelated version that I'm not proud of. I definitely wish I could have found better. Putting Lyra in there was an homage to a running joke that we have, that Hunter is a super duper big crush on Lyra. And also, I just wanted someone in the passenger seat there. You know, because the Millennium Falcon was always crewed by more than one person, I figured the Aluminum Falcon should be crewed by more than one horse. So that's why I went with there. And they're talking. And by the way, the way we get Lyra and Hunter in frame on at the same time is just multiple layers. So Lyra's actually on the top layer here, and Hunter's on a lower layer, but they're never overlapping, so the effect is seamless. And then we have this. The laser. I came up with the idea to have one individual laser beam coming from both the main body of the Death Star, one from and one from each ear, to make the main beam. Because like with the real Death Star, it all congregates into one central beam and then fires. But with this particular design, it was originally just gonna be for like aesthetics and like, hey, it looks like Mickey Mouse's head. But then I decided, why don't I give some functionality to it? And that's what I decided to go with for that. The sound effect is literally pulled off of the internet. Death Star super laser sound effect. So it's the actual original super laser sound effect from the movie. Then for the actual firing, it flashes in, the final beam flashes into existence. I gave that sort of a green tint, as you can see from there. Then it sort of fades to white, fades out rather nicely. It's a little bit seamless. The actual bit where they meet here, that was Google search for green energy, and it's actually cut off a little bit on the bottom here. I am not happy about that. Each of these images was compiled, like the original. I made a 1080p image and plunked made the whole thing transparent and put the Death Star right there. Added one laser, added two lasers, added the third laser, and then added the final laser. And the whole thing came together quite nicely. Put a space background on it, and the whole thing came out really, really good. I'm very happy with how this particular thing came out. It's literally just an image sequence. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The explosion effect, it's really difficult to find explosion GIFs with transparency on the internet, or at least ones that are really big and run for a very long time. This particular explosion effect, I've used a number of times in Hunter reviews. We did it for the temple explosion during the Dusk's Dawn review. I did it every time he fired the orbital friendship cannon, which is a joke that I've sort of gotten rid of. Otherwise, we'd just use it to destroy the Death Mickey. The way that laser comes in is just a gradient wipe. It's the same gradient wipe each time. And for that, I just go over to transitions and I grab a gradient wipe. I believe I used this one. So the linear wipe goes in from left to right. So that transitions to it's all one big image. Like this is the actual image that it's edited down rather interestingly. This is what it actually looks like edited into frame. So it's coming in from off camera. I actually just photoshopped the Death Star laser beam. So it actually came out pretty authentic looking. So it fades in from the left. So it looks like it's coming from off camera almost. And then I combine that with sort of a flash on top of the same gradient wipe, which is basically erasing it in the direction that it came from. So it looks like it's being fired into the actual Fox logo. Here, do it from down here. It looks like it's actually being fired into the logo. And by the time the entire flash is like in frame, the explosion is going off. The effect is seamless in actual motion. And then we cut back to the aluminum Falcon interior. The sound effects for the interior were actually engine sounds from the original Millennium Falcon. Again, pulled off of an internet search. So this is just some image sequencing. Lyra's on the bottom this time, and Hunter's on top. This over here is actual movie footage, but it's pulled from It's actually pulled from a game, which I'll get into in just a second. More image sequencing right here. This right here, and then this right here was a fun shot to do. Now this, people were probably gonna wonder how I did this particular shot, and that is, and that's because it's from a game from forever ago called the Star Wars Millennium Falcon CD-ROM playset, and if you look down here, you can see here's one clip, another clip, another clip, and another clip. Maybe another. This one's actually fading into the next clip, and then there's this one, which is that. And the whole reason I did this is because the Millennium Falcon CD-ROM playset, all of the things in it are edited together in such a way that it's all one big FMV sequence game with a couple of things edited over it in the same fashion as to what we're doing with this video. So, like one of the things you have in that game is the ability to fire the guns, and it has two different forms. One where you don't fire the gun, and the other one where you do fire the gun and the thing explodes. And it's all of the things for that level, like whether you miss or whether you hit it, and all the different things that can happen in the level are all edited into one video. So it required a lot of heavy editing. For the most part, it worked out pretty good, but the cuts are rather abrupt. For example, here's one frame, then we cut over to the next frame. The effect is pretty seamless. You mainly need to keep an eye on the TIE fighter in the background there. As you can see, it's a fair bit closer here. So the cut isn't particularly perfect, but I went frame by frickin' frame for this one. Another example right here. You have the opportunity to, I think, destroy a turret, and I decided not to do that there. But every single choice is here. Actually, another thing I had to do was make sure that this was towards the end of the level, because that back wall just pops into existence. It's very abrupt, and it really doesn't look too good. And as you can see here, it's another just seamless transition. Now this one didn't look too terrible on camera, so but as you can see right there, just barely you can make out the ghost of a third TIE fighter. And like if you're going frame by frame, you can clearly see one circle, two circles, three circles for the one that's exploding. But it makes it look like that one TIE fighter is exploding. Ow! And then there's one where you don't fire the missiles and one where you do fire the missiles. Obviously, we go for the one where you are firing the missiles. The missiles kind of just pop right into existence there. And I know they're supposed to be photon torpedoes. Yeah. This next shot right here, that's sort of an interesting transition. I'm not sure if that actually cuts in on film, but it's only on screen for one fraction of a second. Now, there's a number of effects going into play here. There's 3 different explosion effects. It's the top explosion starts out rather slowly, but then sort of engulfs the entire thing. These 2 explosions were for the top 2 bits right there. And then like if I get rid of this, you can actually see the aluminum Falcon is just there. So with it pops in underneath the explosion and then just flies away. The effect is really good on film. It's out of frame there, but but that's mainly because this software tends to lag. And that, by the way, that fly away sound effect is another actual sound effect. The gun battle, the fighter battle that's going on in the background of this particular shot.
There's hard enough flying this giant
You can hear
ship
TIE
with this
fighters and
tiny
X-Wings
trench.
going back and forth. Well, that's all the way down here. Actually, I can raise that up.
There's hard enough flying this giant.
That's the sound effects for the actual game. This is the sound effects.
There's hard enough flying this giant ship with this
Or that
tiny.
might be the music. Alright, I have no idea where I actually put... Oh, they're down here. Okay.
There's hard enough flying this giant ship with this tiny trench.
So you can hear TIE fighters shooting back and forth. You can hear X-Wings going around. It's another sound effect pulled off of the internet. Actually, these guys are edited into frame in a rather similar fashion to how I edited a bunch of other stuff into frame, as you've seen before. Like Hunter, what I did here is I have the option to flip this around. As you can see, the F is backwards. I have the option to flip this horizontally, and so now he's there. Or I can flip it vertically, so now he's there. So what I did was flip this back, flip it vertically, flip it horizontally, so that he's mirrored and he's actually looking off in that direction. Lyra's image is relatively the same way. She too was actually facing the other direction. And this was about the only, this was the only image I could get of her looking the other way. And I flipped her image around in the same fashion I flipped Hunter's, and then put her head down in the corner. And she only has one actual vector, and I went with that. Hunter, for that one bit where he's looking over to her, needed little to no editing, so I went, so I just put his head down in the corner as well. Anyway, so the Falcon flies away. Hunter's hair, this is a vector that actually cuts off on the side, as you can see right there. That's where the image ends. So this particular vector always has to be like up against a wall or the side of the screen or anything for that matter. And these images here are positioned in relatively the same way the rest of the shot was positioned. There was actually a little bit of photoshopping that went into view for Lyra holding the cider. What I had to do here, I took a vector off of the internet from MLP Vector Club. I think that's where I found it. I actually, in the original shot, which is actually, I think, still on our Patreon, you could actually see the back of her chair here. And in this shot, I actually photoshopped that out. And you can actually still make out some of the stray pixels from her chair. Some of the black that's left over, especially up here and around here. But she's not zoomed in too much in the actual shot. And there's a bunch of stuff behind her, so it blends in rather well. And then Spike comes into view. He is actually transitioned from down below. And that image is also flipped. So, as you can see, these two are really close together. And it's only a few frames for the transition. But he comes up, like, really fast to ask him what the hell is an aluminum Falcon. Which is another homage to something else, Robot Chicken skit about Emperor Palpatine and getting a call from Darth Vader.
What the hell is an aluminum Falcon?
And that's where that opening bit ends. And then we get the opening sequence right there. And then there weren't really any particularly great effects for the rest of it, but I'll go over a couple. The Millennium Falcon cockpit, or the Aluminum Falcon in this case, easy to find off of a Google search. And actually, the full image, I think, is a 360-degree view of the cockpit, but this is an edited down version. Couple of other things. These images are actually separate. This right here, his head, and then a layer above that is his hoof edited into view, and then another layer above that is another hoof edited into view on the other side. And so that way we get this effect.
On one hoof, I really want to see your long-term plan for this franchise. And on the other hoof, I really want to see an Eclipse-class Star Destroyer on film.
Just some of the stuff that goes into making that. And then one of my favorite things to do for this, believe it or not, was the credit sequence. Because what I had to do for this was I actually had to take a snapshot of the whole thing so that we wouldn't have multiple layers, and then have an iris fade out in a similar fashion to Star Wars, and that's where our credits are. And then I put a star background on it, painted it blue, and put the Star Wars credit music over it. So from start to finish, at least without the opening text crawl, as they call it, the whole thing feels like an actual Star Wars movie. And then at the very end here, we have our patrons who I will admit I could have put them on screen for a little longer, and I didn't. I could have made the sequence go on for a little bit longer. These titles are actually copy and pasted from the last review, with this actually being edited to fit the appropriate movie. In this case, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, copyright of Lucasfilm and Walt Disney Motion Pictures. Then our disclaimer that the video is illegal under fair use. Edited with so-and-so. Footage from Episode 8 trailers. Giving credit where credit is due. And our supporters. And then it fades out. And this one is the actual speeding bullet. It's more symbolic with the bullet coming back, at least for me anyway, because it's like, okay, review's over, back to normal, back to not being in a galaxy far, far away. And that is the entire sequence edited together. Oh, the ice planet was another Google search. When I searched ice planet, I think I searched ice planet horizon, because we were over because the whole thing takes place on an ice planet. If I can zoom in, the whole thing takes place on an ice planet, and and this looked rather cartoony-ish, which fit the MLP look of it just a little bit better, just a tiny bit better. The 20th Century Fox logo, that was easy to find. You just search 20th Century Fox logo. And that is the entire image sequence. It's really just a big, huge image sequence with that's been spruced up with complicated transitions and whole bunch of other stuff, like a few visual effects in there, some stuff from Star Wars: A New Hope. And a couple bits of game footage. The whole process took about 3 days, believe it or not. Mainly because I was running around looking for assets, and I couldn't find any. But it came together rather nicely. So that is behind the scenes for Hunter Reviews Star Wars: The Last Jedi. If you liked it, let me know. I could do behind-the-scenes stuff for for my other reviews. I don't have a lot of them saved, or a lot of the files and stuff have been deleted, and I won't be able to do it in this style. But I can do it for future reviews if you guys want, so let me know.